Russia has one of the largest militaries in the world and some of the most advanced weaponry available, outnumbering and outspending Ukraine. Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February.
It was as sudden as it was brutal and relentless.
Russia is moving fast.
This happened really within minutes of Vladimir Putin finishing his declaration of war in Moscow.
The Kremlin believed it could conquer Kyiv in a matter of days, according to Western intelligence. But after admitting it had suffered significant losses, which reportedly included generals and other high-ranking officers, its forces withdrew, leaving a trail of devastation behind them. So how did Ukraine defy the odds and push back Putin's war machine? The war actually goes back nearly a decade. In 2014, Russia illegally annexed Crimea. The Kremlin then gave its support to rebels in Donetsk and Luhansk, an area known as the Donbass. Since then, Ukrainian forces have been battling Russian-backed fighters who want the Donbass to break away. At the start of that conflict, Ukraine's chief of the general staff said his army was literally in ruins. Fears of a full-scale Russian invasion motivated Kyiv to rapidly reform its military. With backing from the West, Ukraine modernized its force, tackled corruption, and transformed the command structure.
They were very kind of Soviet, rigid hierarchical structure, but in the 21st century, the speed and lethality of modern war, you can't do that.
And now officers are encouraged to make key decisions themselves.
Empowering lower-level leaders to seize that initiative on the battlefield. That's why the Ukrainian counterattack is so successful.
The weapons Ukrainian forces have used have been a vital part of their success so far. Particularly, NATO-supplied handheld anti-tank and anti-aircraft firearms. This is key because Russia depends on its so-called platform capability, such as tanks and fighter jets.
So you've actually seen this evolution of military capability. Anti-platform weapons have become more effective than the platforms themselves.
These weapons have also played a key role in stopping Russia from getting complete control of the skies. The Ukrainians have combined missiles like Stingers and Martlets alongside older Soviet-model surface-to-air missile systems to take down Russian aircraft.
What the Ukrainians have done is made it too dangerous for the Russians.
Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2 drones have been effective in a similar way to the handheld anti-tank equipment. They're light and precise next-generation weapons that strike big, slow-moving columns. It might not be as eye-catching, but logistics is arguably one of the most important factors in this war.
By logistics, we mean getting supplies and troops to where you want them to be.
Moscow transported its tanks, troops and supplies to Ukraine's border using the rail networks in Russia and Belarus. But once they entered Ukraine, they couldn't rely on these supply lines anymore. Instead, they needed trucks, and lots of them.
The Ukrainians seemed quite set from early in the war on attacking Russian trucks.
Almost 800 Russian trucks and jeeps have been destroyed, captured or abandoned since the war began, according to open source evidence. It's also estimated that Russia has lost more than a third of the roughly 1,200 tanks it rolled over the border.
The best way to stop a tank is to keep it from moving. Get rid of its fuel. Then it just becomes a beached whale.
This is what happened to the 40-mile Russian column outside Kyiv.
Satellite images confirm it's big, deadly, and dangerous.
But it became a massive traffic jam. Hundreds of vehicles gridlocked, needing fuel and repairs.
One of the great logistics disasters in warfare.
Putin's war machine has fallen short of the modern, well-organized image the Kremlin had projected before.
There are significant corruption problems in defense procurement in Russia.
It's a huge problem. In 2011, Russia's senior military prosecutor said that 1/5 of the Russian defense budget is stolen through corruption, and there are reports of $10 billion being stolen since 2014 alone. So this may explain why trucks were sent in without military-grade tyres, and why Russia had to rely on cheap, unencrypted radios and phones to communicate. And some say the buck for these failures stops with Vladimir Putin. Putin has long held the view that Ukraine is just an extension of Russia, that Ukrainians would welcome Russian troops with open arms.
Еще раз подчеркну, что Украина для нас это не просто соседняя страна. Это неотъемлемая часть нашей собственной истории, культуры, духовного пространства.
Instead, they were met with fierce opposition.
Putin seems to have launched this war based on extremely faulty intelligence.
Western intelligence says that a culture of fear in the Kremlin has meant Putin was not given an accurate picture of Ukraine's willingness to fight.
What are the Ukrainians fighting for? Their homes, their families, everything. And I can tell you from being in Ukraine, that entire country is mobilized.
So Ukraine has survived this first phase of war. Its forces will be buoyed by this, and NATO is supplying even more advanced weaponry. But the Kremlin is now concentrating its forces on the Donbass region, and there are fears this more open terrain is better suited to Russia's strategy, and the military leadership will turn to more ruthless tactics that they have used in previous conflicts.